Okay, so is the mic working?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, so good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'll wait to take some questions. I know there's like 1 minute, at least a few seconds before 5 o'clock. So we'll wait for people to join in. And as we are waiting, I'll read out some of the questions that we have got. We got a couple of questions from students via the Google form. One is regarding what happens when in a smaller motor unit, half of them are not recruited. Will there be any effect or disorder occurs in our body as a result of this? The other is about reference books. Right. I'll answer these questions as we go along. If there are other questions, I'll take those first, and then um I'll take these questions. All right. I hope everybody is solving assignments and you're all um, preparing to register for the exam. For what it's worth, the deadline for registering for the exam is September 10th. So that's pretty close, right? I've seen several of you have already registered. Um, I want more of you to register for the exam because, as I mentioned in one of the emails, it's very important for you to keep challenging yourself. Of course, learning is open ended. You can learn forever, you can watch videos, you can read books forever. But unless you have specific targets or unless you have specific challenges that you solve, it'll be very difficult for you to actually schedule or actually force yourself to accomplish certain things. So you could, for example, read entire Candle and Schwartz or watch these videos over a period of so many years indefinitely, right? But if you register for the exam, that kind of forces you to do this within a time limit. And in the end, by October 28th, or when the exam is over, you will be in a position to appreciate yourself, right? Within that time, you have learned so much content. So it kind of challenges you. It kind of keeps you on track. It kind of keeps you on schedule. That way, you will not lose focus. So this is normal. This is normal human behavior. We all need targets that we can work towards. Otherwise, it's very difficult. So I request you all to register for the exam, right? So unless you register, it's going to be difficult for you to keep watching video and read book in an open-ended fashion, in an open loop fashion, and get practically no or very little output out of that. Because when there is an exam that you're preparing for, right, the chances are that you're going to be more sincere about that and you are going to be pleased with the outcome. So at the end of the day, we want you to benefit from this experience, right? So I encourage all of you to go and register for the exam. The last date is September 10th. So, and it's entirely possible that on the last date there might be a lot of registrations that will go on. It's possible that the server might be overloaded. So I request you to not wait till the last date. Please register in advance of the last date, say within the next few days, so that you avoid the last minute rush. All right. So I request you all again to consider registering. Are there other questions? So I have someone, Madhavan. Good evening, Madhavan. Divya, good evening, Divya. And I'm reading questions from the right side, so I'll turn right to read the question and I'll answer by looking at you. All right. So there were a few people who came last time. I'm looking for those people. Yeah, Pankaj was there last time. Thank you, Pankaj. Pankaj has already registered for the exam. I appreciate that. I know several of you have already registered. I appreciate that. Uh, Others also, please register. We want more registrations. For us, it's not about the count. It's about the fact that we want you to get the maximum benefit by doing this course. And that's possible only if you challenge yourself and if you schedule yourself. We can't do that for you. As in any online course, it's your motivation that matters more than my motivation, obviously. So I request you to put in your fight, right? So Pankaj has registered. I appreciate that, Pankaj. Very good. Great job. And so Gautam, Gautam, so did you register for the exam? Good evening, Gautam. He was there last time. So I'm trying to push specific people, but I'm pushing all of you actually. So those who are online, Ramu Ramu Rao has registered for the exam. Good job, great job. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Encourage your friends to register, please. Right. Those who are already online, did you guys have any specific question? So Gautam has registered. Good job, great job. Thank you. And that means that you know what to do. October 28th is the exam date, and so you have your task cut out. Today is September 1, so many more weeks, and you should be good to go after that. So there's a question from Aquarian, right? The first question of the day. Sir, what is the scope of neuroscience in cognition related jobs? So, okay, this is a very broad question. So, today's world, right? Um, there isn't uh, a field where neuroscience doesn't have a role to play. We'll get started with that discussion, right? First and foremost, I see is the role of advertising industry, right? And the role of social media companies um, such as Facebook, such as Google, and other companies that have an interest in influencing public opinion, right? And there are several of those nowadays. Even it is said that even elections can be manipulated. So if you can manipulate a whole large population, it's possible for you to actually manipulate an election. We are not sure if I'm not political here, we are not sure what happened with the elections, but whatever it is, we would be surprised if this was spoken 25 years ago or 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. If someone said that the election results could be manipulated, uh, I mean, in the US, we would all be surprised. Of course, there's a different kind of manipulation that happens in other parts of the country where, ballot boxes are taken away. That's not what I'm talking about. There are people who try to influence the mind of individuals or groups of people. And these people are interested in understanding how the human mind works, right? So neuroscience has applications starting from there to advertising, right? Advertising industries have a great interest in understanding where the person focuses on while watching an advertisement, right? Where do you want to put the billboard, for example? Where do you want to put the particular brand name, for example, right? You might think that this is trivial, right? It's not. If the a car traveling at about 100 kilometers an hour, you're going to be looking at a billboard for about a few seconds, or sometimes even a fraction of a second, depending on the a particular angle at which the billboard is presented. If there was no effect for the billboard, right, people would not pay money to actually if there was no effect for that billboard, people would not pay money to put that billboard up, right? Because it's expensive. These things cost, and advertising obviously has an effect, right? So there is an increased interest in understanding this. So cognition has one important role is to try and train or manipulate the human mind or understand the human mind as to what the people want, what groups of people want, and how to do that. That's one. Two is to help in training, right? This is a benign use other than the negative use of manipulating people. The other is to train individuals. This can be people, this can be children, how to improve better teaching approaches, for example. Or this can be people with special needs, people who have learning disabilities. uh, if we can understand the neuroscience of how learning happens, for example, how cognition happens, then it's possible for us to come up with better approaches, right? So once again, cognitive science or cognitive neuroscience has an important role to play in learning. The other is in rehabilitation, right? So in dementia, for example, um, by the way, dementia occurs by itself as a problem, but dementia also occurs as a comorbidity in several other, you know, neuro disorders, right? There is Parkinson's related dementia, there is stroke related dementia, etc. Now once again, in this case, people are have been adults, but then they become children one more time as they age, or as age catches up with them and age related disorders catch up with them. Then what happens? They are not, they become children one more time. They need to be taught the basic things. You probably may have seen or heard of someone who is facing the problem that I'm now talking about, right? A old person, a grandpa or a grandma, who is facing problems that they don't remember their own grandson, right? This is happening to me, for example. Right now my own grandfather has Parkinson's related dementia, right? It's hard, of course. When you go through this personally as an individual, right, it's very hard to see this. And you're a professional from the field, you understand the science of this, you understand the neuroscience of this, but that's not going to make it somehow easier for you to face the problem. It affects the families in very big way. What can we do? Develop specific rehab approaches or teaching approaches, right? So cognitive neuroscience has a huge potential in all these things. The other thing is in understanding what stimulation can do, how stimulation can improve learning and rehab related benefits. So this is an important uh, application of cognitive science or cognitive neuroscience in this. Of course, we are talking in this course, we are focusing on movement neuroscience, but the way I see it, movements in future, you will see, or in the future weeks, you will see that I will be presenting evidence to support the idea that movements are essentially manifestations of decisions, right? Whenever you're talking about decision making, that's essentially a cognitive task. So cognitive neuroscience or cognitive science is not very far from motor neuroscience that we are working with. All movements, for example, the fact that you have taken the time to log into this to this live session, for example, you have put in the file, you made some movements that typed your login and clicked the appropriate link, all that. These indicate your decision to actually join this, right? So movements are manifestations of specific decisions, okay? And that means that movement neuroscience is close to cognitive neuroscience. These are all very close fields. For example, I work in motor learning, and I try to ask questions about what component of motor learning is actually due to cognitive learning and what component of it is due to motor part, right? When you learn to play the piano, for example, or play any musical instrument, there are components that are purely motor related, and then there is a component that involves cognitive learning. It would be very interesting and useful for you to try and dissociate which of this is coming from which source. If we can do that, then it's possible for us to provide specific training approaches or to improve specific training approaches for specific defects, right? So again, we are in moment neuroscience, but cognitive neuroscience is not very far for us. So these are the applications that I see. Jobs are plenty. In fact, if you say today that you are an expert in cognitive neuroscience, right, there is no end to the job prospects for you, especially if you're really good at this, right? You could get a position in any of the multinational corporations. For you, we would think in India, sitting here in India, we would think that it's only the computer scientists who get jobs in Google, Facebook, Amazon. No, Google, Facebook, Amazon, all the time they recruit professional psychologists, professional cognitive neuroscientists, so they can understand how the human mind works. This is their core goal. Of course, they are doing it for it is debatable about their intent in doing this. They are for profit companies, so their intent is questionable, but they are doing this. So jobs are plenty, and there isn't any particular of course you should be extraordinarily good with that, right? So that means you need to train yourself to do that, right? I think I have taken sufficient amount of time. Let me try to ask other see other questions. Okay, that was from Aquarian, a very long answer. Srikanth is asking, can you give PDF material? So this question keeps coming up. So just so yes, unfortunately, we have not been able to get those uh, videos translated into PDFs. As I mentioned, um, this is something that we are outsourcing to a third party, and obviously we are only able to commit to timelines that we can keep. uh, I will try and follow up with the vendors to see if they can get some of the weeks transcribed and presented to all of you. But unfortunately, at this moment, I'm not in a position to commit to a timeline on that. So I will at least follow up. Okay, that I'm able to. I will make an attempt. Right. Um, I agree with Srikanth. Yes, I know. I mean, those are very useful because that way you could revise better. I understand that because you cannot keep watching the video again and again. It's difficult. If you watch the video once and then reading from that material will be extraordinarily useful. I'm able to see why you want that. I also would prefer that you all have access to that. I will make an attempt. All right. Yeah. Ramu, Ramu Rao, thank you, Ramu Rao. You are very, very kind. I appreciate your comments. Uh, wow, there's a question from Sarvesh. What is the meaning of cognizance? Okay, I'll trade. That's a. Or what is the meaning of cognition? Please answer my question. Meaning of cognitive. That's what he's asking. I'll try to answer that question. Sarvesh, I'm going to answer your question. In the meanwhile, I'll see. Okay. Sarvesh, I'm going to answer your question on cognition. Okay. Um, I suppose this has something to do, cognition has something to do with, I'm giving a very non technical answer here, that something that involves the human mind in its various aspects, where a person is able to, feel, respond, and uh, cognate. In that sense, cognate means to think, to be conscious, to. And so for us, for this course, right, what does this mean? This means, once again, as I mentioned earlier, any movement that you're making, right, as I'm speaking and I'm choosing my specific words, right, uh, I'm making a decision on the specific word to be spoken. So this decision making, I suppose all these functions, right? The functions um, that include perception of what is around us, and decision making and interaction with the environment. We do this all the time. I suppose this umbrella term, in some sense, defines cognition. Of course, there are technical definitions, but I'm trying to help you to see the boundaries of what is generally meant by this. This is practically almost everything. Of course, there are technical definitions that talk about cognitive science versus behavior science and so on and so forth. I'm not getting into that debate, but this is a very non-technical definition of the term. And okay, someone is saying we need PDF. Yes. Sam is saying that cognitive means basically thinking. Yeah, no, that's true approximately. Yes. Okay, I'm trying to see if I can get the other questions. Okay. Divya, Kavibala, Nibin Ramrajan registered this week. Thank you, Madhavan. And yes, we need PDF. I see that. Yes. So could you please simplify as how the arrangement of sarcomeres in parallel and series affect the lengthening and force produced by the muscle? Not able to get that question, but let me make an attempt. Can you please answer in Hindi? Oh, I am unfortunately uh, challenged in Hindi. Absolutely no knowledge of Hindi. I apologize for that. So, growing up in this uh, in rural Tamil Nadu, where I had no access to learn Hindi, unfortunately, I'm just making do with my broken Hindi to even interact with cabbies in Delhi and Bombay when I travel. So it's just ridiculous. Yeah, I don't know Hindi. I'm sorry. Uh, the difference in between behavior and cognizance. Ooh, big question. I suppose behavior refers to outcomes that we do, as opposed to cognition, that is generally believed to be more of an umbrella term that includes what is also felt by us. I suppose that's the difference. So, behavior is a smaller section. Cognition includes behavior. One way of looking at it, right? I am trying to see if there are other questions. Stimulation. Someone is asking, can we shift from engineering to psychology? These are questions that I cannot answer because, it's your choice. You need to make a decision on what you want to do. I, and let's remember one thing: you need to keep doing things that please you at any point, that gives you joy, that you feel is fun doing. But don't, for example, assume that that's going to be the same throughout your life. We also change as functions of time. As you age, as you grow, um, you change, your interests change, and be willing to accept that. So if you think today you are liking this, that's fine. um, are you willing to put in the fight to get a job that will pay you, and that will put bread on the plate? I mean, not just bread on the plate, something that's going to help you, uh, help your family survive with that. So these are questions that only you can answer. People choose various weird disciplines and are very successful. That's because they put in the fight to become, become the expert or become the research person in that field. So these are all choices you make. One can be successful in doing anything they want. So I'll let you make your choice. But one thing I want to remind you is that, don't assume that once you have made a choice, you cannot go back or something. You keep learning, you keep doing these things, and after some time, your view of what you like itself will change, and accept that. For example, I grew up as an electrical engineer. I wanted to work in wireless technology and wireless engineering. In the 2000s, early 2000s, I did not get a position in the EE department in IIT, but I got a position in the biomedical department. This is what I got, so I just decided to do this. And as I grew in biomedical engineering, I liked this field. I realized that this is what I like doing. And slowly my interest shifted from biomedical to neuroscience. Now I'm working in movement neuroscience, behavioral neuroscience. And so far has it's been good, but now I'm getting an interest in studying, for example, in studying how sleep affects cognitive learning, how sleep happiness affects cognitive learning. It's believed that, if you learn a lot, you'll be happy, but the opposite is also probably true. If you are happy, you'll learn a lot, but how much? What is the limit and extent of this improvement in learning that is seen due to happiness, or say due to meditation, or due to improved sleep, for example? So my interests keep changing. Hopefully soon I will shift, I will start doing research on these topics. I have come to accept change as the permanent thing. So it's fine. So whatever you want to do, it's fine. as long as you keep working on it. It's important for you to go deep. That's what I mentioned in the last live chat. That's what I'm asking you now. Go deep. Don't learn things superficially. That's not going to help you provide value that people will be willing to pay for. At the end of the day, you must put bread on the plate. You must, take care of your family. So it's important. Right. I think we'll go back to the technical question on this. Simplify how the arrangement of sarcomeres in series parallel affect the lengthening and force produced by the muscle. I'm not able to get the specific question. I think. Okay. So sarcomeres arranged in series. Right? Sarcomeres arranged in series constitute a myofibril. Right? So several sarcomeres arranged in series. And so if one sarcomere contracts, it's essentially pulling the other sarcomere on that. So, and several of these myofibrils arranged in parallel constitute a muscle fiber, and several muscle fibers arranged constitute a fascicle, several fascicles constitute a primary bundle, and then secondary bundle, and then tertiary bundle, and then a muscle, etc. Right. So this is the hierarchical organization of the muscle. It's important for us to remember that at the level of the sarcomere to sarcomere connections are in series, whereas myofibril to the next myofibril forces are not transmitted. Rather, these are in parallel, right? Myofibrils are arranged in parallel to have one fiber, and several of these fibers are arranged to have one fascicle, right? I suppose this was also there in one of the earlier videos. I don't know which one. I'm not able to take the specific video, right? So if there are from the series and parallel arrangement, it is immediately possible for us to deduce how much of or what is going to be the role of individual sarcomere force or the average sarcomere force on the overall outcome of this system. Right? So that's like a and engineers can immediately tell us, can someone say what is the relationship between, say, the average sarcomere force and the maximum force that is produced, for example, right? That's something that engineers among us can immediately say. So also lengthening, right? So if one sarcomere is shortening, right, it is pulling the next sarcomere. So the force length relationship of the muscle as a whole is defined by individual sarcomere length changes. This was also explained in one of the, I think, in the practically the same video or the next video, in one of those videos, where I say that there is a particular optimum length at which the muscle is going to produce the maximum force. That's because at that position you're going to have maximum actin myosin overlap. By the way, when we say muscle, we are talking about several thousands and thousands of sarcomeres. But it's important to note that the muscle function on the whole can be explained by sarcomere function. So essentially, if we understand sarcomere function, we'll be able to explain muscle function at a larger level. Right? So that means sarcomere function to a large extent defines and controls muscle function, right? So that also in that video, if you see, I would be speaking about what happens if the muscle becomes shorter or longer. As the muscle becomes shorter, what happens is that the actin filaments start overlapping. Then what happens, there isn't that many binding sites that are exposed to the myosin filaments. That way there isn't going to be maximum cross bridge formation, reducing the force that is going to be produced, right? Also at higher lengths, what is going to happen, there isn't great overlap between actin myosin sites. In other words, the number of cross bridges that are formed will also be lower. All these are found, these explanations are all found in Candle and Schwartz and in other physiology texts. So please do take the time to check this. Also, so if you see, for example, what happens during shortening and lengthening of the muscle. So during shortening and lengthening, while the muscle is shortening, it turns out that the force produced far as it is shortening, the force produced usually decreases, whereas as the muscle is lengthening, the force produced increases. This is because, again, because of sarcomere function. This is there in Candle and Schwartz. Please do check Candle and Schwartz. I mean, I encourage you to not just stop with watching the video and just taking notes or just taking the assignment and be done with it, because of course, as you would have seen, some of the assignment questions you cannot straight away answer from watching the video, because they have been taken from other sources. So please do refer the book. When I say book, I'm talking about Principles of Neural Science by Eric Kandel and Jimmy Schwartz and others, right? So please do check. All right. The other question, Dr. Divya is asking, what is the role of stimulation in white matter disease child? Ooh, I have no clue what this is. I think what she is referring to is children who have compromised white matter. So is she talking about conduction problem? Is she talking about communication problem, dystrophy? I don't know which specificness she's talking about, and I am not also not sure how stimulation is going to help these kids. I'm not from the clinic. I'm more of a theoretician. I work on the science side of things. So if I'm not able to answer questions, I request you to please excuse me. Please do refer textbooks, and if you want, I can check and get back to you on that. But right now, I'm not able to answer that question. What is the role of stimulation in white matter disease children? All right. Are there any other questions? Yeah. Balamurugan is asking how. Okay, I think we have digressed. I think we have digressed. The Balamurugan is asking the relationship between neuroscience and biomedical engineering. I'll answer that later. But before that, during the explanation of presynaptic inhibition, you said neurotransmitter no neurotransmitter is released, but shouldn't the excitation of presynaptic action by the inhibitor neuron already release the neurotransmitter? Excellent question. So, okay, presynaptic inhibition. Let's remind ourselves of this concept. This is a case where the calcium level is kept artificially at a heightened level, so that any newly arriving action potential could have a lesser effect in releasing neurotransmitter. But Jishnu's question is, well, that may be so, but if I have already released some calcium, then some neurotransmitter could have already been released, is it not? It's not possible for you to not release neurotransmitter in response to calcium availability, right? That's the question. The answer is yes, true. If I have an increased or enhanced calcium present at the presynaptic terminal or at the synaptic end bulb, surely a neurotransmitter will be released. However, we are talking about the specificity or the specific outcome for a given action potential. If I have already released some neurotransmitter and that neurotransmitter has been taken care of by other processes, for example, excitator neurotransmitter's effect can be neutralized by an inhibitor neurotransmitter, or esterases in the case of acetylcholine. For example, acetylcholine esterase would break up acetylcholine and as in break up acetylcholine and convert it into acetate and choline, and thus removing its effect from the cleft. Then what happens? Then the cleft is essentially free of the neurotransmitter. Now, if a new action potential arrives from the neuronal cell body of the presynaptic terminal, then what happens, the amount of neurotransmitter that is going to be released in response to that action potential is going to be smaller than what would be released if there was no enhanced calcium level. So essentially, this provides a fine tuning of the amount of neurotransmitter that is provided. It doesn't completely control, but it offers one more manner. It provides one more knob with which I can control the amount of neurotransmitter. It's a fine concept, right? So if you see, in the good old days, you used to have multiple knobs on radios. So you used to have one for volume, or the other for frequency or choosing of a band, and then a third one where you can finely adjust the frequency. You know what I'm talking about. There is gross adjustments, and then there is fine adjustment. Here, the presynaptic method, the presynaptic approach to inhibition provides one more method, or is a way to finely control this, and selectively. You could do this selectively in specific neurons, but not in other neighboring neurons. So this is a complicated concept, but I hope you realize that if calcium has already come in earlier, and neurotransmitters has already been released in response to that calcium arrival, then you're going to have only less calcium being released later. And if the neurotransmitter released due to the previous calcium arrival has already been broken down or has already been neutralized due to other things, then the effect is going to be essentially smaller in the postsynaptic cell. So we are talking about what's going to happen in the postsynaptic cell in response to a given action potential. That's something that can be inhibited also presynaptically, is the topic that we are discussing. I hope that's also clear in the video. Maybe there was some discussion in that. Right. I hope that there's one question on biomedical engineering and neuroscience. I'm going to come to that in a bit. It says chat disconnected. Can you come and check? It says chat disconnected. Is everybody online, or I don't know? It says chat disconnected, unable to connect chat. Please try again later. I have no idea what is going on. But Divya is asking, what is the role of early intervention or stimulation in motor learning in children with, I think, developmental disorders? We hope that, again, this is a very complicated question. The question is, can early intervention help in children with specific disorders? I'm not able to answer that question because it's not clear what is meant by that. As in, what specific disorder are we talking about? If it's and when you say learning disorders or when you say developmental disorders, you are talking about a whole bunch of or a spectrum of disorders, not just one. And they come in different forms. They come in different different phenotypes that you are not. There isn't a one size fits all solution. The hope is that there is going to be better response if with early intervention. That's the hope, but you never know. You can never be sure. Which is why I generally believe that this one size fits all solution is it's not going to be very apt in this kind of field such as neuroscience. Each human is different, each brain is different. So in fact, the truth is that each brain, when it gets the disease, right, it's different. If the brain is different, then the disease is also different. So this is the reason why neurologists find it very difficult to dose the patients. Different patients respond differently to a given medication, right? That's because our brain is some product of the net product of what we are born with and our experiences. Our experience, to a large extent, shapes who we are, right? And that's physical. Of course, obviously that's a rhetorical statement when I say that. I'm saying our experience makes who we are as individuals, as a non-material object, but it is also reflected in the connections, in the synapses, in the way neurons communicate with one another. So that means that our each brain is different, and our response will also be different. Of course, that's not a reason for us to despair. What we are interested in as neuroscientists is to still find patterns in this. Are there specific groups of individuals who will benefit from specific therapies, or are there specific individuals who will benefit from specific learning approaches? Right, those are the questions that we are trying to ask. In general, it's very challenging um, for us to study and come up with specific results. Neuroscience is still, to be honest, is a field in its infancy. We have very little idea of how this works because of the complexities that come with this. The other part is the results from animal studies. I think approximately now, or in one of the future classes, I think it's in the next week's class, 6 weeks class, where I talk about animal models. Animal models have been an extraordinary source of knowledge and information for neuroscience. A lot of understanding of specific pathologies have come from animal models. But the problem is the temptation for us to extend every result in the animal to the human. That's where we are lacking. So um, I don't know if I answered that question or confused you more, but uh, I think I have at least tried to provide a specific, or to some extent, I have tried to provide an answer to that question about developmental disorders. Right? Someone is saying, "Thank you, Sir Jishnu." Oh, you're welcome, Jishnu. I'm trying to. Wait. So, deep learning applications in cognitive domain. Exactly. This is what Facebook, Google, Amazon, they're all trying to do. In fact, Amazon says that depending on how long or how much time you spend on a particular page, they can actually package um, your product before you even click on buy now. Right? I'm not so sure of that, but this is a claim that Amazon makes. So essentially, they know what you're going to buy. I don't know if this is true. Deep learning means, again, uh, I believe by deep learning, what is meant is uh, pattern matching of specific cognitive data. I suppose this is a very, very exciting area, and this is an exciting time to be in. What's important with this deep learning is to understand that responses are not going to be as one you would think. Usually the response, or the time it takes for these deep learning networks to converge, is not small. It is not instantaneous as people would have you believe. This is something that's not going to be discussed in any neuroscience course or any neuroscience workshop or a conference, or nobody will say that this is the case, but this is the case because these networks are essentially algorithms, right? So this they just keep mining data or long times. So they take, usually depending on the strength, depending on the specific properties, characteristics of the data, they may take less or more time. You can never be sure with how long a data set or a network is going to take to converge, right? Unless there is convergence, you can never be sure of that. Right, so that's the deep learning part. So of course, if you can program the fast processes, or the fast processors, the GPUs, for example, then it's possible for you to reduce the amount of time it takes for these networks to converge. But that's a hard area. If you can actually program the GPUs, you are a star. It's very easy for you to get a job. Uh, so that's, again, another opportunity. um, Explain how neuroscience is closely related to biomedical engineering. Well, as I mentioned in the previous chat, biomedical engineering essentially. So by engineering, we are talking about creating devices, creating assistive. In this case, right, we are interested in brain-computer interfacing, assistive devices, prosthetics. There is a tremendous opportunity out there. So if you Google, for example, or if you YouTube, if you search for the Johns Hopkins hand, there's this wonderful hand that's controlled by a person who doesn't have a hand. So this prosthetic hand is controlled by data that is collected from a person who doesn't have hands, and in real time he can grasp objects, drink from cups, etc. Let's remember that actually that NASA or one of the American agencies spent hundreds of millions of dollars to make this a reality. Can we make it affordable? I think the opportunity is there in providing affordable and widely adaptable, wearable, and healthcare, or in general, devices that's going to be assistive in nature, or in those that measure specific parameters, right? If it's affordable, if it's going to reach a larger market, it's going to scale. So again, the opportunities are there. Specifically with regard to neuroscience and movement neuroscience, we are talking about prosthetics and brain computer interfacing, right? Opportunities are plenty. Once again, it comes down to the engineering part, connecting the hardware and the responding to signals from the brain and the body in real time. If you can program that, nothing like it, right? So I don't know if I answered other questions. Can we apply cognitive neural networking in decision science? The answer is yes. So that's what I have been talking about. There is a huge uh, there's a huge opportunity in understanding how the mind works, but how are these decisions made? How are these algorithms that are used to understand the decision making processes are also deep. So problems are many, solutions are many, challenges are many, uh, opportunities are many. So it's up to you. Neuroscience is related to what is the role of early intervention or stimulation in motor learning in children? I think I answered that. How much impact spinal cord has on motor nervous system as a whole? If the spine is important, uh, is the spine important as brain in neuroscience? The answer is yes. Spinal cord is part of the central nervous system. We usually think whenever we refer to the central nervous system, we think as laymen that it usually refers to the brain. No, spinal cord plays a crucial role in motor function, in taking information from the cutaneous receptors and other receptors, proprioceptors and other receptors, uh, giving information about body state to the brain, etc. So spinal cord plays a crucial role, which is why injuries of the spinal cord have a devastating effect on individuals and their families. So it's very important to realize that spinal cord is part of the central nervous system, has a huge effect on this, although it is the or in a way, looking at it from one way, it is the Cinderella of neuroscience. So less looked into, given less preference. Brain is hard child, brain is hard, is glamorous to study brain rather than to study spinal cord. By the way, studying spinal cord is also harder than studying this, but it really depends on how you look at it. It maybe even some people would say, oh no, it's not hard or it's easier. It really depends on how you look at it. But yes, spinal cord plays an important role. One thing to remember is that the role of spinal cord in movement and in general in function varies on which species we are talking about. And this is something that I have discussed in some of the future, I think in some of the future classes, where I talk about how much or what specific role the spinal cord plays in the function depends on which particular species, whether this is a cat you're talking about, whether this is a rat you're talking about, whether this is a dog or monkey or a chimpanzee or a human. That varies, the response varies depending on that. uh, yes, so spinal cord plays an important role, and very important in India. So we are talking here in India, important is to stay safe from two-wheeler motorcycle accidents, because motorcycle accidents are the single largest source of spinal cord injuries in India. And once this is broken, there's no cure. As in, there is, depending on the severity, depending on the problem, on the response, or how much the patient is going to be able to recover, is limited depending on the specificity of the area and the severity of the cut or transactional lesion in the spinal cord. But it's always better to stay safe. Motorcycle accidents cause the biggest, or the single most important source of spinal cord injuries in India. So which is why if you go to a spinal cord clinic, right, you usually see young adults, like about 20 years. Some of them are in teens, completely uh, unable to use their limbs, quadriplegic. All their four limbs are gone. They move their wheelchairs with the help of movement of their face and eyes. You know how ridiculous this is. They have a whole life ahead of them, 40, 50 years to go, and they have to live like this. It's very hard. So stay safe, take care of yourself. Spinal cord, one, you have one of it, and if you don't take care of it, that's it. So of course, the example given in the class is people falling from horse. You could fall from a tree, or you could fall from stairs. There are many things that could hurt spinal cord. It's important for us to always take care of ourselves. And this is also the reason why falls constitute a major cause of mortality and morbidity in young adults, especially in elderly, right? This is the other problem. Okay, I think I've digressed, but that's the part. I think I answered machine learning, deep learning in impact on cognitive domain. I answered that question. There are several other questions. Anusha, what happens to sarcomere length when load is more than the force produced by that sarcomere? Well, what would happen? What would happen is that, the sarcomere force is less, but the load is greater. That means what will happen is that the sarcomere will get lengthened, but force will still get produced. This is what is called as the eccentric contraction, as a lengthening contraction. Right? This is explained in one of the videos. Excellent. Raghu is watching all the videos, so he's catching me on one of those things. He's asking, during explanation of reflexes, we were told that the thicker, larger one ear gets activated first with stimulation. But during motor neuronal recruitment, or in size principle, I think, so Raghu, I know that you're watching videos, and I also know that you have taken notes and comparing notes. Extraordinary. I appreciate that, really. I'm very impressed. Right? So, but during motor neuronal recruitment, which is size principle, smallest diameter cells get recruited first, is it not? So that means in these two classes, actually, I was hoping that you won't remember, right? So essentially, I'm talking about two things. Does this mean that 1A afferent cells are generally smaller than motor neurons? Or are there different mechanisms controlling the activation and recruitment, and not just the size diameter of cells? And so I'm going to answer that question. Someone said, Geeta, I'm going to answer that question in a bit, right? So that's that question. Before that, I'll take the other question. I couldn't get Candle and Schwartz. Okay. Well, Candle and Schwartz is an expensive textbook. I see that. Unfortunately, I'm not able to provide an alternative. I'm reading from Candle and Schwartz. It is the authoritative source, and I like the motor part in that textbook, so I'm using that textbook. I'm not able to provide an easy alternative, or a less expensive alternative. I see that it is an expensive textbook, and it's harder to get. So it my request is to keep searching. You'll find it for a less price, or you could or some of your friends together can buy it and share it. There are many ways in which it can be done, right? So I realize, I admit that it's not exactly an inexpensive textbook. I admit that. Yes. Synesthesia, does it have an application in biomedical engineering? Ooh, I actually don't know what that means. So synesthesia is this condition where the numbers have colors, or the colors have specific, are associated with specific numbers. So our own a person of Indian origin is the considered expert in this field. He also talks about it in his book. This is Vilayanur Ramachandran. He speaks about that in his book called Phantoms in the Brain. So, what is the relationship to biomedical engineering? I'm not able to see, but actually, I don't know the relationship between the synesthesia and engineering part. Aquarian is having a question, but I'm going to take. Okay, Gautam is asking, is there a soft copy of Candle and Schwartz available? The answer is yes. I have the Kindle version, the soft copy. Of course, I paid almost the same amount. I have heard rumors from my students that they have, or some students who I am no longer connected to, say that they have had access to illegal PDF copies. So I actually don't know about that. I have the legal Kindle version. I have the hard copy book in our library that I access. So I really do. Apparently, PDF copies and soft copies are available. This is what I have been told. So I'm not so sure. Right. I'm going to take Aquarian's question later. But before that, there is this question from Raghu, right, that I tried to escape. Okay, if you remember size principle, there I am usually talking about a synaptic current, right? So that's the difference, Raghu. The synaptic here, in the case of the 1A afferents, we are talking about an application of a voltage, a potential, right? Current and potential application of, or current and voltage application at the same point, have different effects on the system. The truth is that 1A afferents are in general the largest, right? And they are first recruited in the case of so in while discussing reflexes, right, we say that the 1A afferent is first recruited and the response is usually the H reflex, right? So that's what is discussed, and I keep increasing the stimulation strength more and more, or even smaller 1A afferents get recruited and the H reflex size increases, but after some time the H reflex size reduces. This is what we discuss in the case of H reflex. And in the meanwhile, M response, which is due to the response that the muscle itself, or the motor neuron itself, causes on the muscle, right, starts, right? So M response has a shorter latency, but its amplitude keeps on increasing monotonically, whereas the H reflex amplitude increases until some point. After that, it decreases. This is also because of the synapses that are involved, as we discussed, right? So this is the case. This happens, all this discussion, right, is due to an application. Whenever I say stimulation, you could go back and check the video. I would have said millivolts in the case of 1A afferent and M response. In the case of H reflex and M response, we would have said millivolts. Also application of a potential. There are current. There, I'm talking, in the case of size principle, I'm talking about a synaptic current, and that involves essentially not electric current, but ionic current, increase of ionic current due to, as in synaptic current essentially refers to sodium, calcium, and other such this. So that's what we mean by synaptic current. Here we are talking about an application of an actual potential. I hope that clarifies. So Raghu, can you confirm if this is clear for you? Right? So please do go back and check. I'm glad that you caught me on this, and I'm happy that you are not only watching, you are also able to synthesize. Again, something that I want all of you, this is for all of you. it's important to not just learn individual concepts. It's also important to connect and synthesize concepts, right? So it is the synthesis that is going to be valuable for you. Not mere understanding of a simple concept can only take you some to some distance. You may be able to answer the questions in the exam and get the points. Ultimately, you are learning this, I hope you're taking this course so you can take something from it that you can translate to the real world, right? That's possible only if you try and synthesize content. That's possible by not just watching video, but by also reading textbooks, by also referring other web sources, by also checking, by also discussing with friends and connecting concepts that are there, like one of your friends has attempted to do here, right? It's important for you to synthesize content from multiple sources and try to make one sense out of this. Raghu, did I answer your question? I don't know about that. I think he kind of logged out or whatever. In the meanwhile, Aquarian is asking a different question. Why in spinal anesthesia during surgery doesn't affect on head and neck part if spinal cord is part of the central nervous system? As in, is the question why? If I hope the question is the following. The question is, if the lower part of the body is to be operated upon, if the surgery is on the lower part of the body and spinal anesthesia is given to that to the appropriate zone in the spinal cord, that is why the top region is not getting affected. I actually don't know the answer to that question, but I know how spinal as in the pain from the lower part of the body isn't carried. That is obviously by disabling those those circuitry, right? By using specific anesthetics, right? So the pain information that goes from the lower part of the body is not reaching the brain, right? Pain is something that you feel in that part of the body, but it has to reach the brain for it to be processed, right? Otherwise you will not be able to process that. So that's how that works. The question is not that. The question is, why if I inject in a particular part, why the upper parts are also not feeling the this? That is a technical question. I don't know the answer to that question. I'll try to find out and let you know. I suppose that has to do with the specific region of the injection and what is injected, right? It's not possible for you to turn off and how much is injected. Probably it's not possible for you to turn off a whole system by a specific agent in a specific quantity. It's possible that more is needed, or it's possible a different agent is needed. I'm not an expert in anesthesiology. I cannot answer that question in that detail, but I will make an attempt to learn and get back to you, because I have a friend who is an anesthetist. So Raghu is saying thank you. Please do check what I'm saying. I may be wrong. If I'm wrong, please do post in the forums. I will try to answer that better. I think this is the reason, but please do check. Please check with the book. Please check with your friends. For whatever reason, do not assume that I am always right. I'm not. We all make mistakes. I am also human. I try to minimize the mistake. That doesn't mean that I'm careless. I'm careful enough and I try to minimize the mistakes, but it's possible that we have mistakes. In that case, please do point out and we'll gracefully accept. I think something that my friends have told me, my students keep telling me is, for me, right, the reason why I keep learning is because I'm open to the idea of admitting my own mistakes. And this is something that we should all develop. I'm not saying I'm great at it. I'm okay. I mean, I still have ego. We all have egos. So it's important for us to stay vulnerable, to stay in a situation where you can keep learning. Otherwise, your own ego will become the deterrent for your learning. It's important for us to accept and welcome mistakes, which is what I'm trying to do here. That does not, of course, mean that we are careless or we don't care for the work that we do. We make a sincere attempt to do it well. However, we are humans. We may make a mistake. So please do point out, and we'll gracefully accept, and we will find a way to fix that. Right? That's important. As long as you have the attitude of fixing things, it's not a problem, I think. Anyway, I think Aquarian is having a different question. C-section in spinal anesthesia in lumbar region, it is injected. Yeah, I'm not. I'm an engineer turned neuroscientist. My knowledge of anesthesiology. He's talking about C-section. Yeah, my wife had a normal delivery, so I have no clue what you're talking about. But kidding. Jokes apart, I actually don't know what this is. My understanding of this is very limited, right? Aquarian, I'll try to answer that. If you can kindly post that in the discussion forums, I will try to find the answer to that and post it. I appreciate it. Hey, something that I wanted to remind all of you is that the discussion forums are, extraordinarily quiet. Everybody, is it that you're all trying to be super polite, or you don't care, or you're very busy, or I'm not able to see a real activity going on in the discussion forum? It's possible for you to use the discussion forum to teach each other. Of course, I will answer questions, but what's important is that you try to answer each other's question. It's not possible for me to answer all questions. It's also possible that I actually don't know the answer to several questions. It's possible that some of you may know the answer to that questions. Some of you are doctors. Some of you may be able to answer why this anesthesiology part is working like that, or whatever. It's important that you try to ask and answer questions and try and teach each other. That's one method in which you can improve learning. I'm talking about this course, where you can try and interact more in the discussion forum. Usually it's one question that is posted, and at the end of the day, at around 10:30 or whatever, I have a specific time at which I check it, or 2 times a day I check it, and I just say this is the answer. But I'm not seeing participation from others. You can answer too. You are not. I hope you realize that you are not restricted from answering. In the discussion forum, in the announcements, of course you are restricted. You will only receive what we tell you. That's a different forum. That's a different group that we use to make important course related announcements. But in the discussion forum, you can answer. So please do answer. Please do participate actively. I encourage you to do that. This is a very, very interesting question, right? Aquarian, great question. Is there a way to check neurochemicals such as serotonin, dopamine, etc. in the brain? I mean, working in balance. Usually, what's done? Okay. In the future classes, I'll be talking about dopamine. I realize that we are out of time. Those who want to stay back can stay back. Others, those who want to go can go. But let me. Also, there's another question on dopamine, right? In future classes, we will be discussing dopamine. Yes, there are a few 20-minute classes, or 2 or 3 20-minute classes in which I discuss the crucial role of dopamine in neuroscience of human movement. For movements, dopamine is crucial neurotransmitter, neuromodulator, right? So a lot of discussion in future classes towards the end, actually in the 12th week, I think, 11th or 12th week, I think. Dopamine. So the question is not that. The question from Aquarian is, how do I check how many millimole per liter? What is the concentration of dopamine? Or something like that. How much quantity, what volume of dopamine or serotonin or whatever is present in a particular area of the brain? Can I know that? We usually do the following. What is usually done is we record from activity of specific dopaminergic cells, neurons. If they are more active, more dopamine is going to be released. But that's not what Aquarian is asking. If these neurons are active, that means more dopamine is going to be released. This is how neuroscience proceeds. This is what I will be discussing as part of the course. However, there is now a technique developed by Anne Grabiel of Massachusetts Institute of Technology and her colleagues in Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where they have measured the amount of dopamine in the substantia nigra pars compacta of the brain, right? The amount of dopamine that is present, as opposed to what we usually do, we neuroscientists usually do, which is recording of dopaminergic cell activity. That's different. This is hot. This work was just published 2-3 months ago, I think, or maybe within the last 6 months, in PNAS. I could provide the link online in our discussion forum. That's a very, very hot area. Very little is known about how to measure and how to validate those measurements. It's a new topic. It's a new area. So when I say that it's done in Massachusetts Institute of Technology, it's published in PNAS, and it's in the last 6 months, you realize that there is very little information on that. So it's this kind of measurements are just beginning to be done. Okay, so that's new. I'll try to dig up that paper from my Zatero folder, from my bibliography, and try to post it on the discussion forum. All right, Aquarian, if you are part of the discussion forum, if you are not part of the discussion forum, please become part of it, or please become active in it. All right. Yeah, I have answered the question by Gautam also, right? In the meanwhile, there is this question by Sindhuja, a student. What happens when in a group of a smaller motor unit, half of them are not recruited? Will there be any effect or disorder occur in our body as a result of that? I have no clue what the question is. I think if she's asking if a specific set of motor units are not used, what will happen? Well, if they are not used, then they are going to be lost, right? As in, it's expensive to maintain muscle mass as opposed to maintenance of fat, which is why you see we have fat people like me, as opposed to muscular people. It's harder to maintain muscle mass, as in it's expensive from a metabolic viewpoint to maintain muscle mass. So it's if you're not using, then you'll lose it. That's the usual approach, but I'm not able to understand what she is meaning. Will there be any disorder? Well, there'll be just general dystrophy and functional effects of dystrophy. As in, if you're losing muscle, then you will not be able to lift heavy weights, so as one would expect. So I think that's the answer. I want some reference books by one of the students. One of the students is asking, I want some reference books. I mentioned already, so the reference texts are Candle and Schwartz, Dale Purves works, several physiology texts are there. There are some texts on available for free on the internet, legal copies available. There are several websites dedicated. The sky is the limit. You need to keep googling. There is this nice website called neuroscientificallychallenged.com. I know that's a ridiculous name for a website. It's a very long name, I understand that, but the website has content to teach people who are neuroscientifically challenged some neuroscience. Very interesting set of contents. I'm trying to learn from them. I'm inspired by that website, to be honest. Neuroscientificallychallenged.com. And there are other resources. I'll try to post those online. I'll ask my TA to post those online. You could refer to some of these are very nice summaries of what we learn and what we do. I'll try to post those. How sensory processing affects motor movements is Divya's new question. I am not able to understand exactly what she says. How sensory processing, as in, is she asking, Divya, are you asking the reflex kind of effects, or are you asking how the somatosensory cortex as a parietal cortex affects decision making and then motor or voluntary movements? Or is that the question? Or because if it is voluntary movements, parietal cortex, premotor cortex, primary motor cortex kind of question, you'll have to wait for future classes. If it's the reflex part, that's been discussed as part of the reflexes, right? So essentially, sensory information from the spinal cord goes to multiple places. It goes to via the Clark's nucleus to cerebellum. It goes via to the cerebellum and to the primary somatosensory cortex to be processed. But before that, it involves itself in multiple loops within the spinal cord. So there are actually monosynaptic, oligosynaptic, polysynaptic reflex loops in which sensory information may affect this. Some of these may have, that means the responses can be of different latencies, right? Something that we saw or we are seeing in this week or in the next week or something like that. I hope I have answered some of your questions, and I hope I haven't confused you more than what you have been already. That's a sincere hope. I hope many of you will register for the exam, and many of you will try and participate in future editions of this live. If depending on the interest, I will try to have these meetings more often. Depending on the interest, I will try and see how much of this is um, use. Depending on the interest, I'll try to see schedule more of these meetings. All right. So thank you very much, because we are running out of time. Somebody is asking a question: is it safe to take mecobalamin orally by tablets for a vegan? I have no clue what that means. What is that medication? I have no idea. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a physician. I'm not an MBBS, MD. I have no idea what you're talking about. I am an engineer converted neuroscientist, kinesiologist, movement scientist. So this is my profile. So my understanding of physiology is very limited to neurophysiology, right? Divya is saying her question is regarding about sensory. Oh, vitamin B12. Yeah, that's like, yeah, vitamin B12 deficiency is a problem with vegetarians. I have that. We all have that. Sorry, but I'm not still an expert on that. Um, my question is regarding sensory processing disorders and motor movements. Yes, this is a huge topic of research. um, Disorders that cause deficits in sensory processing also usually have a motor effect. This is a very hot area of research. This is being now hotly investigated by several of my colleagues. I'm also very interested in this topic as to how deficits in specific sensory processing, such as proprioception post stroke, affects movements, for example, or inability to, or deficits in cutaneous response processing affects movements. These are of well, obviously movements are also generally affected, but there is also the effect of sensory system, or deficits in the sensory system affecting movements. It would be very useful for us to dissociate the two. How much of the deficit or a given deficit is coming from due to defect in the sensory system, and how much of it is actually coming due to defect in the motor system. Depending on that, the therapy and the therapy approach can and will change, right? This is a hot area of research. People are beginning to get excited about this. My own reading and my own understanding of this topic is severely limited. However, I am trying to dig up deep, because I'm also getting excited about this. Is a very, very hot topic. People just are entering this field of how sensory deficits affect motor deficit, or what component of motor deficit is actually due to sensory defect, and the other is due to motor defect, right? If there are no more. Aquarian, thank you so much for your questions. Aquarian says thank you, you're welcome. So yeah, thank you all for all your questions. So many good questions coming from Aquarian and all of you. There was also this smart question that trapped me by asking, hey, there you said, a higher world or a bigger one gets recruited first. Here you are saying the smaller one gets recruited first. Thank you so much for listening to the video so patiently. I feel it's immensely rewarding to note that you are actually taking the time and the energy. What will be even more rewarding is if you take this to a logical conclusion by continuing in the course, by watching all the 12 weeks video, and by taking the exam and challenging yourself and understanding how much you have learned. And if at all possible, to put this to real world use, I would be very, very pleased to note your progress. It's immensely rewarding to hear this, right? Thank you so much for your attention, your patience, for staying back. I appreciate you joining here today. have a great rest of the evening, Saturday evening. Have a rest of the um, have a great evening. Thank you very much, and I hope to stay in touch with all of you through discussion forums. Please do participate actively. Right. Thank you very much. Okay.